Hi kids, we're still still on a computer. I don't want you to get bored or anything, but um, there's a lot of things about it. I mean, some things that people take for granted, I think. Um, what I thought would be interesting is when you have the motherboard in a computer, it's really a dumb device. It has no real program or information to run. Maybe two things really. One's called a bootstrap. The bootstrap starts the whole thing running, and that's just usually a very simple code. And then there's what's called a BIOS, or basic input output system. And the BIOS resides on the motherboard because you can just turn it on, and at least you can set certain settings, set the peripherals and things like that. And remember I talked about the chipset. You would set those things up in the chipset. It might have onboard video, things like that you could set up in the BIOS. But that's all it really does. The BIOS just gives the motherboard a common system that an operating system would use then to communicate to the motherboard. So an operating system like Windows or Linux or DOS or Macintosh, it doesn't matter what operating system, they need to know how to communicate to the hardware or the motherboard. So it does that through what's called the BIOS. So all the operating systems will use a common basic input operating system of how to communicate to the hardware. And that's not necessarily, it's kind of like a standard, but it comes with the motherboard. So PCs or Windows computers are one way because Windows is always can use anybody's motherboard. I'm getting a little detailed. All right, forget about BIOS. We'll leave that for another video. All right, so back to the motherboard is this kind of a dumb device, even though it might have the BIOS, what I just talked about. But it's not going to do anything unless it gets a program to run. And a Windows or Linux operating system is really just a program. It's a program that runs on the motherboard and then gives you, the customer, a user interface to then load applications, play games. So the games are then an application that runs inside Windows, let's say, or Linux. So it's dumb until it gets something. So that's when you use a hard drive, like this is a flash hard drive, SATA hard drive. You would store your Windows information on that. You would run, and that would be the initial application really that's running. It's the program that's running on the motherboard, and then your computer becomes intelligent. It's something that's actually usable. And so the Windows is a program that makes the dumb hardware usable. So when it loads and it's usually loaded into the can you see that? Memory. So the memory is that's where the operating system gets loaded into. So it doesn't run off the hard drive. It first has to grab it from the hard drive, put it somewhere that the CPU can actually execute from. So it'll execute from the RAM. It won't execute from the hard drive. It's going to get it into somewhere that the processor or the main CPU that's underneath the heatsink, that then will read and execute program instructions out of that memory. And that's happening on processors nowadays at literally billions of times a second, believe it or not. So that's basically it. So you have a PC is dumb until you give it a program and run. That's why they charge sometimes so much for operating systems. It takes a long time for those programmers to put that together. So appreciate it. So it's not just you buy a piece of hardware, you buy some programmer's long, hard work that then runs on your stupid computer. Have a good day.